Welcome, everyone. Today is Monday, September 18th, 2023, and this is a regular meeting of the City of Asbury Park Planning Board. Chairwoman Kurzak, can you please call this meeting to order?
Yes, this meeting is being held in compliance with the Open Public Meetings Act, Chapter 231, Public Law 1975. Adequate notice of this meeting has been provided to the Coaster, Asbury Park Press, and Asbury Park Press by publication of the annual meeting notice and posted on municipal bulletin board and municipal website. All notices are on file with the board secretary. Official action may be taken on the following matters before this board. Fire exits are located on east and west sides of council chambers, as well as the back of the building. I will ask everyone with a cell phone or other device to kindly silence your device for the duration of the meeting. This meeting is being recorded via APTV for your future viewing pleasure. Please join me with a Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge of Allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I will now take roll call. James Bonanno.
Here.
Councilwoman Clayton.
Here.
Eric Gallipo.
here.
Jim Henry.
Here.
Mayor Moore is absent. Daniel Shenameo.
Here.
Jennifer Souter.
Here.
Michael Goonan.
Here.
And Chairwoman Barbara Kurzak.
Here. Okay, the first item on the agenda is a resolution for 637 and 701 Lake Avenue. Does anyone have any concerns about the resolution that has not been provided to our attorneys? Okay.
Barbara?
Yes.
Okay, yeah. He asked a question in the resolution on page 1. Is there a variance for penthouse elevator bulkhead that they not be visible from the principal streets? You see it?
I do see that. Is there a variance?
Is there a variance?
I don't believe that that's something that's required in the city.
I think what we did was, if you go to page 2, I think it's page 2.
What's in the report from CCH? Is it identified as a variance in the report?
I don't know.
I didn't bring my...
Is there an issue if we move this to October 2nd?
I don't know. I mean, do you need me to call Jeffrey?
Yeah, because we can certainly do it while we're going forward. We can slip this in.
Or you can adopt it subject to verification of whether, I don't think a variance is required.
I don't think a variance is required either because we see elevator
Jim, I'm
shops.
sorry. Where did you see that? And
That is on page 1.
It wouldn't be a variance. It wouldn't be a variance.
Is there a
I'm
variance
just
for
looking to see if I
penthouse
have
elevator
a
bulkhead?
different
There's no
version.
bulk standard for that says.
I didn't think there
with
was.
Distance or side triangle, there's no criteria for that. At most, it could be as a design exception, which unless Donna or Michael identified it as such.
They said the variances are minimum ground floor commercial space and ground floor commercial frontage.
The version that I'm looking at, I don't see that.
Jack, CCH report says that, the wording is not exact, but it says that you can't see the penthouse from the rooftop units from the streets, but you can see it from other buildings in the neighborhood because
That doesn't
they're...
make it a variance. They're just making a comment.
That sounds like very much, because obviously you will see.
Certainly not a bulk variance, I know that
Right,
for sure.
right.
And more than likely, it's not a design exception.
Well, could we approve it with just we'll double check this one item?
Yep.
And, because I agree, I can't imagine that would be a variance or that.
Typically, elevator bulkheads are not included in your total height,
They're
mechanical
exempt.
Right.
spaces,
From the
you
height,
know.
from the height, from
And then other
stairwell
buildings will be able to
steps.
see it, sure, they're gonna be able to see it from
It's
above.
good planning to put, or it's been forever, that we put mechanical systems and everything else set back so that people can't see
Yeah.
very much.
From the street.
That's just sound planning.
Right, and that's what they've done that, but I think the question is from elsewhere.
Yeah, no, I think you're saying, but you could put a caveat in.
All right, let's put that caveat in there.
And then tonight, I don't know if I here, I will
Yep.
check on that. Okay.
Okay, can I get a motion?
I have a question.
Yes, go ahead.
Does it need to be in the resolution that because I know they said the parking lot was going to be one way.
Yes.
They didn't call it out here. I don't think you can call it out here.
Is it in the record?
It is in the record, yes. Numerous times we've talked
So then
about
you
it.
should be fine.
Okay.
Yeah.
As long as it's in the record and it's in the plans that are submitted, that were approved, it shows one-way traffic. And, you know, I'm sure there's a reference in his resolution that says representations made on the record.
Yes, there is.
And so are the plans and the map, so you're fine.
Sounds good.
Okay. All right, can I get a motion to approve that resolution with the modification that we have to just check that one variance /
So
design waiver?
So Jim,
Jim,
second.
So moved.
I can't.
Who's eligible?
Well, Jim just made a motion and
You make sure you.
he's eligible. I just need someone to, Michael Gannon is eligible, okay? Those that are eligible to vote are James Bonanno,
Yes.
Councilwoman Clayton,
Yes.
Eric Gallipo,
Yes.
Jim Henry,
Yes.
Michael Goonan.
Yes.
Resolution is adopted.
Was I not? eligible?
It does not have you as eligible, why not?
Flashlight.
So hold on,
Siri, turn off the flashlight.
let me just double check that.
Okay,
Oh, we're just checking.
all right, let's go for the,
Barbara, hold on, I'm sorry, we're just checking to see if I.
We're trying to see,
Oh,
for
okay.
some reason on the resolution, she may have been left off.
I don't think
But-
I got an email to me either, that's why I'm wondering why, I missed one meeting. But I
Yeah,
don't think that was it.
because this was a couple of meetings, and I missed one also, so therefore I can't vote. But I don't think it was a significant one, but still, it was one.
It's fine as long as they don't need me. You don't.
Now, no, you're good. People have voted.
Okay,
Okay.
The dates of those meetings are in here someplace. Okay, if you need
yeah,
it.
Does Jeff Lift
we're okay.
list the attendees who were eligible?
He does, no, he could have missed Jen, but I'm looking on my attendance to see why that would have happened. That could have been a mistake. Because, well, Jen, you were absent on the August 7th, and that was, they presented that day, so I'm
Okay.
guessing, much like Barbara, that's why.
That makes
Okay.
sense.
Yep.
All right. All right, the next resolution is the planning board master plan amendment for the arts and culture plan. I know that there was one item on that, it was like at the very bottom. But we can talk to, it's just wording. On the very bottom, it says August 21st, 2023, it's the last paragraph. Meeting was made by Barbara Krizak, which motion was seconded. So it was like the motion, it's probably like the motion, because
Oh, motion.
yeah, it's just motion, it's not, you know.
Wrong choice of words.
Yeah, it was just the wrong choice of words, that's all.
Sorry about that.
So just, that's,
Amend
And it-
meeting to motion.
yep.
Is there any concerns about the resolution? All right, can I get a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, so I've got arts and culture plan. Okay, Barbara Karzak,
Yes.
Mayor Morris absent, Michael Goonan,
Yes.
James Bonanno,
Yes.
Jim Henry,
Yes.
and Daniel Shinameo.
Yes.
Sorry that was a little out of order, apologies.
Yeah, there weren't that many people there.
And that's adopted. So that was, yes, the A's have it.
Yes.
We're good.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, okay, we're done.
Okay, next item, we have also old business, 700 Monroe Avenue. We'd like to carry that to October 2nd without further notice. Can I get a motion to carry?
Move to carry.
Sure.
Has to be, let's put a condition in there, so long as the applicant agrees to extend any time.
Yep.
Anytime the attorney calls up and asks to be carried, you gotta make sure you tell them, gotta
Got it.
extend any time. Most of the time it doesn't run out, but we wanna make sure it's covered. They'd be hard pressed to request an adjournment and then try and claim on appeal.
When I send
Not act on
the,
a timely basis.
when I send out an email to you about the other resolution, I'll do the same for this one. So.
Okay.
Okay, James Bonanno,
Yes.
Councilwoman Clayton,
Yes.
Eric Gallipo.
I will have to recuse myself from this, right?
Sure, if you were out, yeah.
You-
No, I was-
He is on, Eric is recused, he is correct.
Yeah, that's correct. Thank you, Eric.
Jim Henry,
Yes.
Daniel Shinameo,
Yes.
Jen Souter,
Yes.
Michael Goonan,
Yes.
Chairwoman Barbara Kurzak.
Yes. I am going to request that this is fine for this topic, but I think that there are some people that have, we've been doing this for so long, 700 Monroe, I don't know if everybody's caught up on everything, because there have been many, so if I could just go over what I might have to still watch that I haven't been present for, because I'd like to be able to do this one.
I believe I have a running list since I started.
We do or do not?
I do.
Okay,
But
that's fine.
if we need to go further back.
No, just
Okay.
from when you started, because then everybody, that should come up with everybody. Who's missing,
Got it.
right? And then we can make
I
sure
also
that
think it's
everybody,
making
because I know
you
there were,
recused. You are recused from that one.
it's just that this has been going on for so long and some people have been out, and I think that we may,
Yeah.
there'll be some people that may have to catch up a little. And it may only be one viewing, but still, we have to do that.
Absolutely.
All right?
Yep.
All right, okay, next. Next new business, proposed new state of New Jersey EV ordinance, electric vehicle ordinance. Who's presenting
We're gonna have
that?
James do a little,
Sorry?
we're gonna have James do a little
Oh,
intro and
Look at you,
Yeah,
let's do that.
I'll just introduce it real quick.
All right, well, James, if you don't mind, I'm gonna put you there.
That's it.
You gotta be on the hot seat. Unless you prefer to sit there.
This chair looks way better than that chair.
Okay, please raise your right hand. Someone swear testimony about to give in this matter, be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
I do.
Please state your name for the record, spell it, and give us your affiliation with the city in terms of why you represent.
James Bonanno, Bonanno. I am the city's Director of Transportation, and I drafted this ordinance on behalf of the planning board.
Thank you. You're on.
Okay, so if anyone's not familiar, the state kind of passed an ordinance that I've seen it already here a few times. Some developers have used it to put EV chargers to lower in the base number of mandatory parking spaces, the minimum number. So I apologize, I was not prepared for this, so I didn't get the whole details ready. But basically, this ordinance came with a section that the city, a small section that the city can customize. A lot of it was mandatory text. If you have it open in front of you, basically right where it says, I think it's E.
How do I identify that? Marie, do you have this?
I think it's page 4 or 5. This is, I'm sorry, I don't have a word on this. No, it's
Do you
very
have the proposed ordinance? That the board's reviewing?
yeah, well, you call it the standards for all new EVSE and make-ready parking spaces.
Yeah, but it's got, it's a specific subject matter referred to as by the council, so it's by ordinance. And I'm thorough, so you should identify that.
Sure.
just make sure that I've got the exact version that he has.
Okay.
This is the one that you sent out. It's on the,
Yeah.
the one document. Where you're going to talk?
Yeah.
This page now.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah, I'll just pre-
Do you want to do A1 for that one?
Yeah, let's make it A1, and that's the ordinance that was referred over to us by mayor and council, correct? And it's concerning adoption of a development regulation for electric vehicle charging, etc. Okay. Under the municipal land use law, there's review powers. Specific review powers are master plan, which the board adopts, and then any development regulation that the city proposes to adopt, ordinance, to amend the development regulations, has to be referred to the planning board. The planning board makes a review and gives comments. Nothing binding, but you give them, the specific statute is 4055D26. It says prior to the adoption of the development regulation revision or amendment, the planning board shall make and transmit to the governing body within 35 days after referral and report, including identification of any provisions, development regulations, et cetera, which are inconsistent with this. The master plan itself, you get amendments to that, you got 45 days, and then you make recommendations on that, but ultimately it's the master plan that's done. So that's what we're here to give, just to take a look-see. And if you have any comments, or if there's any findings by anybody, then we have to find that it's consistent or inconsistent with the master plan, which I assume it is, wouldn't be here.
Yes.
So, that's it, so we'll let James just explain it. That's what we're doing.
Yeah, so if you reviewed it, A through D is all mandatory text. It's things that we're not allowed to change. The state already decided that those are the rules, and we kind of have to live with those. But we do have options to change around like installation, parking regulations, safety, signage, and even charge if we charge you whatever we charge for charging around specifically public use chargers. There's some text in here that allows developers to handle private chargers however they want to handle them, but anything that they were to make publicly available, they had to follow this rule set. And this kind of lays out how they would do that. They would have to, make it available on websites or apps so people can find it. They have to use certain signage that says certain, details about the charging. They can do it at a certain price and can't go over a certain price. They can do X, Y, and Z with the installation of the charger itself. We need to have protection with bollards. So I don't want to sit here and go through every single one of these, but if there's anything you guys have reviewed or saw that you think is either not enough or it could be a little stronger or is a little too strict, we can definitely tweak these to what we think, or how we think public charging should be approached by developers in the city. I would like to say one thing right off the bat. I think I have a typo under the pricing. It says in 6 usage fees.
What page is that, please?
It's the last page, I think, or the second last. Oh, no, it's not.
Okay.
I don't have pages in this.
So it's number 6?
Yeah. I don't have one.
What was the typo?
So basically it says that EV spaces shall be no more than 5 cents per each kilowatt hour. I think I meant to put 50 cents. I know currently we charge 40 cents.
If you do have it, it's on page 9.
Yeah.
It would be all the way at the very bottom.
So it's gonna be 50 cents?
It should be 50.
As my professional opinion, what I recommended was probably 50 cents, because we currently charge 40 cents. And we don't want developers to go too high, but we have EV chargers in the city now that charge, yeah, and it costs 40 cents per kilowatt hour to charge.
In publicly accessible, that's voluntary, right? In other words, the developer doesn't have to make it publicly.
No, this is all voluntary. If they do public, it has to be within the standards that we set, but they don't have to do public charging.
So if a developer decides to put in chargers, which we encourage them to, they can charge whatever they want?
If it's a private charger
Yeah.
inside their building for their residents,
Yes.
it says here, private EBC, so in usage fee C, nothing in this ordinance shall be deemed to preclude a private owner designee of an EVSE from collecting a fee for the use of the EVSE. So for a private one, this would say that they can kind of do whatever they want.
Where do we have publicly accessible?
Madison Avenue, Springwood Avenue, and 7th Avenue.
But you said,
Are they like the fast chargers?
No, we don't have any fast chargers, only level 2 chargers. Yeah.
James, so this is all voluntary?
Yeah, this isn't, nothing in this, it says they have to do EV. It's if they choose to do EV, they can lower their parking regulation minimums, and then this is how they have to go about doing it. But they don't have to do EV, I believe.
Well, there is a provision that does require new developers to have a certain percentage of EV. We did that on Banks Avenue and a couple of other projects.
Is it that, so is this one, is it this, I don't think this is saying.
No, it's not this.
Yeah.
It's another.
Yeah, so it's not this.
Statute.
That's what I'm saying. It's not this.
There's ready, EV ready, made spaces and the like for future use. This is just if they're going to install. For example, we had a matter before the zoning board, on the corner of 4th and Grand, where private homeowners wanted to install. We didn't really have the ordinance, but the board had no problem with it. It was fine, it was gonna work. It was just a matter of location. They wanted it on the Grand Avenue sidewalk, and the board approved it for Fourth Avenue side of the property, the access of Fourth Avenue, back from the intersection of Fourth and Grand. So this is more consistent to give guidelines as to what what's gonna be installed, how it's gonna operate. I'm sure there'll be a next generation at some point after this thing's been used for a while, there'll be some edits and stuff like that.
Should we be concerned at all, James, about I know that there's controversy about this EV ready versus it actually being installed.
No.
So there's, in here where it's still the same thing where EV ready still gives them the credit?
So that's part of the mandatory part of this ordinance. That's the state mandated things that we can't change.
Okay, so it's still EV ready versus, what's the other one called then? If it's not EV ready, it's,
I think it's just EV.
so it's just EV that it's already installed, that they can
Yeah,
just plug it in and we're ready to go?
Yeah.
Okay, so that's state, we can't say it should be EV, not EV ready.
No.
Okay, and are we able to say anything about what a developer charges? Because we would like people to use EV, but if it becomes an exorbitant charge.
You can. So in usage fees, we could, that private area, I understand how you're hearing it, that the private entity could charge whatever they want.
Right.
They probably wouldn't. But if you'd like to put a protection that says private ownership can't charge more than this, we can do that.
Does the city have the power to do that?
Yeah,
It's in this ordinance.
We don't.
Well, the city council could
City
approve.
council would have to make.
Well, we're making recommendations
Yeah,
to city
I
council.
get it, you'd have to make a recommendation.
Yeah, the city council will pass the
The planning board
ordinance.
itself can't pass that.
No, it's not
Oh.
passing anything. You are making recommendations to the city council.
So EV ready means what? They just put a sign that says it's EV ready?
EV ready means when they're constructing this lot or building, whatever it is, that they've already run the electricity to the spot, everything's there, so that when they buy a charger, they can just plug it in. So they don't have to go back in, break everything out, put new wiring in, new breakers in the box, all that kind of stuff.
So they get a credit for having an EV ready?
They get parking credit.
Is there any time limitation?
Yes, there's time limitations
Okay.
about and how many years they have to make it actually EV. It's basically just to save them a cost up front, so they can do the main installation work first, buy the charger later.
And most do it anyway.
What's the time limitation?
It's in the ordinance, I don't have it off the top of my head.
It's 3 years.
6 years, you have to do 1/3.
Yeah.
It's like a third. Oh, yeah. Immediately has to be a third, then 3 years later, 2/3, and then 6 years, they all have to.
There you go.
From what? The beginning of construction and see what?
Jack, I've got a question for both of you, I guess. We have approved a couple of developments lately with the stations, whether ready or completed. Is there some way that we can require the developer to have his tenants use these stations free of charge? We ran into the problem with the parking facilities years ago when we thought that the tenants were going to be using these things, and then they were charged a significant amount of money by the developer. Can we get away from that?
No, we, unless there's a set of standards that's given to us to apply uniform, we as a board can adopt our own standards that say these stations must be included in the common charge.
Can we recommend that in this ordinance that a provision be inserted so the council approves it?
I don't know. I don't know the language of this.
To say that they have to use those chargers?
No, to say that they have to give them to them
For free.
Cap.
Free?
essentially free, or
I guess you could.
they're gonna include it in the common charge.
I mean, I would assume it's similar to what I was just talking about, the same, C under usage fees. I guess you could say that private EVSE, cannot charge at all to residents of the building. You could put it in there.
Doesn't,
You're better off.
Having done a lot of condominium law in my day, it's not free. If they'll masquerade it within the budget of the condominium and they'll be paying for it within the common charge.
Yeah.
Because it's
Then
not-
everybody will pay,
Yeah, and then
not
everybody's
only
paying
the
for it.
users,
But
everyone.
everybody, including the non-users, pay
Yeah.
a proportionate share, because all of your non-specific charges are covered in your common element charges, and your common charges.
Yeah, I don't think it would be appropriate to do that, to make it free, or require them to make it free. Again, setting a maximum price is one thing you could recommend in this ordinance. But for private ownership, I mean, they're going to want their tenants to use them. They're going to want them not to be burdened by it. So usually, the reason that it's in here that there isn't a requirement is because they'll probably do it what works for their residents and themselves, and not overcharge them because they're not doing it as a profit thing. Whatever you'd like to recommend is.
So electricity costs fluctuate, right?
Sure.
So if we put it in here, I mean, if you put in 50 cents, they're stuck with 50 cents forever?
Well, no, so B says this fee may be amended by an ordinance adopted by the governing body. So they can make it a maximum of 50 cents now. Right now, it's much lower than that. Most places charging from 34 to 40 cents per kilowatt hour. That's why I put it at 50, because you fluctuate. If power goes up and people say we can't abide by this because it's too much money, then the government body goes, okay, we'll adopt something, change this ordinance to make it 60, 70, whatever it has to be.
So somebody will come in, a developer, to the city and say, we need a new ordinance, we need this amendment.
If they have to, if they want to,
That's what you're saying, what's going to happen.
if they want to.
Or the
I
city.
mean, we could do it ourselves if we wanted to, if we wanted to check the price, but I don't think that's something we would probably do.
Yeah, the city could do that.
Yeah.
I know that a lot of other cities, I mean, because as you said, it changes, but that's the mechanism to update it. It happens that things get updated.
Yeah.
But you want to have something in there, otherwise, yeah, I mean, it's market driven, but you want to have something in there.
Sure.
I think 50 is very reasonable, just makes sense for this time. I had a dumb question, or a question, when you said the statute, so I thought that this ordinance, I realize we've had other developers coming in here doing this prior to having this ordinance. I mean, doing EV and all that you just described. I don't understand the difference between that and the ordinance. Meaning, when they were coming in and saying, okay, now I'm getting my credit for parking and I'm putting 3 in and I'm doing this.
So this
This is
ordinance is already law, and we
Right.
already abide by it.
It just took us this long, I mean, meaning the
There's-
ordinance. Yeah.
So the beginning portions are all mandatory because they are already law, and those are the ones that everyone's been following so far.
Mhm.
We have the option to make these last few sections a little more stringent or specify to what we would like, which is what we're discussing now.
Meaning that this finalizes Asbury Park's official, those,
So
yeah.
everything about this is a lot of like cosmetics, or like, it's like what you want on the sign. Like, so in under sign, it says like, it has to have the price and has to have a contact number if anything goes wrong. Like, that's the stuff that we are recommending comes into this and play with this.
This is essentially more extensive.
Yeah.
This is like the next generation. What you've been dealing with is for site plans, for new development within buildings. This has signage for the public usage,
Mhm.
maximum charges and all that. And this also will probably work with single-family homeowners as well. I think that this might dovetail in with that a little. If not,
If they want to charge themselves.
it doesn't matter. Okay, but this goes beyond what you already have.
Just so I'm understand, because it's been law for a while, and then we've been doing what's based in the law, and then this is tailoring it with the extra pieces, not extra, but, okay, just making sure that I was understanding.
What Jack just said, because now again, if you're in a single-family home, if you wanted an electric car, put a charger, a charger in your home.
So
Does
this,
law affect you at all?
not really. This is mostly for public facing.
Okay.
If you read through it, a lot of the private there's not many regulations. If you look like sign, A, publicly accessible. It says publicly accessible a lot. Privately accessible, it's really kind of not many regulations because it expects you to have if you have one in your home, it's not supposed to be very burdensome. You don't need a sign in your house that tells you what the price is, So it's very relaxed on privately owned EVs, but when they're available to the public, when they're in a parking garage, when they're available to residents of condos or townhomes or whatever like that from a developer, that's where this comes into play.
So you're distinguishing private, public means like even, that's not given to outside residents.
Yeah, there's,
Even residents in a building.
Yes.
You're considering that public.
yes.
Public meaning if it's on an app, like if I have an electric vehicle and I want to go use one, I can go use it if it's on, right? And then it's 2H, I can't find that page either, it's like either 5 or 6 where it says notwithstanding the provision in section C2E above, a retailer that provides 25 or fewer off-street parking spaces or the developer or owner of a single family shall not be required to provide or install any, so it's basically having that cut off, right?
Where was that part? H? I was saying
I
originally
think
section
it's-
2CE.
I think it's 2H, but I can't remember what the 2H, C2. Under approvals and permit, page 5 or 6, I can't really tell.
So that would be one of the requirements we're not allowed to change. If it's under C,
Yeah,
yeah, those are mandatory requirements that we can't edit. Everything we can edit would be E and afterwards. Standards for all new EVSE and make-ready parking spaces.
Back to usage fees, so I know we talked about the 50-cent limit for the public spaces. And I think Jim brought up, can we put a limit on the private spaces? I think it makes a lot of sense to do so. Living in a building that has public charge or private chargers in our garage, they like gouge you on the pricing, and because they are private, it's private, so that's the one place I can park. They can gouge you and there's nothing you can do about it. If I want to charge my car, it's where I park. So I think putting a limit on, residential use would be a good thing if you actually want people to adopt using electric cars. Because the owner of your building or the owner of your garage has you at their barrel.
I tend to agree with what Michael is saying. Is that would it make sense for us to say that it can not exceed what the city standard is? That the charges cannot exceed?
So yes. Yes, you can put that
Yeah, the
in.
public rate cannot exceed
The public rate.
what the city rate is. So you don't have to say
The short
50 cents,
answer-
60 cents, whatever.
Sure, yeah, the short answer is yes. My one concern is I don't know why they're charging that much, if there's a reason for it, and if we're gonna get pushback from developers. But I guess we can wait to see what happens and then change it if needed.
Would they be grandfathered though? In other words, somebody's already built a building. If you change the price in here, like Michael was
No, you would have to adhere to this pricing.
You'd have to, so now I'm a little confused because I thought you said public, you meant public is,
So, right,
you're not selling it to outside people.
so public is you're selling it to outside people. Public is you have random people coming up to use it. Public is anybody can use it.
Okay,
If you have it in your garage, it's gonna be private. You're not gonna be covered by much of this ordinance. If you have it in a parking garage and it's available to numerous residents, anyone can drive up and use it, that's gonna be public.
In that residence.
But if it's assigned space, if that is your space and it's your EV charger, it's private.
these condos that are here that have some EVs, is that public or private?
Probably public.
Well, could we use
Anyone can use it?
No.
In the building.
in the
So
building?
was it only one person can use that one charger?
No, if in a condo, unless there's some provision, for example, in the waterfront area, that a certain amount of spaces might be required for public usage. Most 99.9% of the time in a condominium, an interior
Are gonna be
parking
private.
on site is gonna be restricted to the residents.
Right.
So
Right.
it's
You
private.
call it private. Okay, fine.
Or
Then
private.
it's probably gonna be that there's very few regulations on private when it's only to the residents. Then
But-
public facing is only when anyone can use it.
So can we recommend pricing for that?
Yes,
Yes.
For which,
Private.
private, both.
okay, no, I'm trying, just trying to
Two.
get clarification.
So
You
then,
said to me private doesn't really, what you're trying to say is if you have a single family home and you put in a charger, a lot of this doesn't apply to you.
Yes.
But it applies to condominium buildings
Sure.
that are private. right?
Sure.
I'd like to suggest that we add that as a recommendation,
Okay.
that it does not exceed whatever is for the public accessible that the city has, whatever that
So
number
it's
is.
sim- it's a recommendation.
It's a recommendation
that
on
the fee
6A.
charged for whatever should not exceed X.
Yes.
Private parking areas.
Sure, so usage fees, A, that could easily just be, public accessible can be removed and just be all
Hey,
EVS.
where you-
That's on page 9.
Page 9. Use-
Page 9 on the bottom where it says 6 usage fees.
Yeah, I mean, you could simply remove publicly accessible and just include all EVS,
Yep.
and that's that.
Yeah.
So you have to take out C.
Yes, we'll see, yes, that's, yes. See what's going on.
Right, so that would be a recommendation to the council, and the council can decide whether or not they would like to adhere to that or not. It's up to them. Do we have anything else that we would like to recommend? Any other recommendations?
I've got a couple of questions. On page 3, in about the middle of the page, it says private EVSE, and then right below that, publicly accessible. In the first paragraph of
I'm sorry,
the
I don't
private.
know where you're looking, because I don't have page numbers on mine. Do you have like the title heading or anything?
It says, it's,
Private.
If it's before section 2, it's mandatory, we can't change it, but if you have a question, I'll happily answer if I can.
yeah, before section 2, it almost looks like
It's
definitions.
definitions.
Those are
It is
definitions.
a definition.
So we can't change that.
Right, but the question I have is, at the end of the first paragraph, you say, as an example, single and two-family homes, executive parking, fleet parking, with no access to the general public. And the next paragraph down, you have almost the same wording, except that you say, et cetera. You're using these as an example. Should we say by way of example and not limited to?
We're not allowed to change these.
James didn't write that part.
Yeah, I didn't write these, the state wrote these, so we are not allowed to change definitions.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, you know,
Anything
but, could you explain it, now go back to the private?
Okay.
If you go back to that private, so I'm getting from I'm reading this, that private means basically single and two-family homes.
No, can't be read that.
Yeah, because this says publicly accessible EVSE includes non-reserved parking and multifamily parking lots.
So this is what I was saying, if it's gonna be in the accountability, I believe it's publicly accessible. That's
So-
why I was saying public accessible before.
So,
These spaces are not,
no, the regular ones are,
yes.
kind of confusing.
It is confusing.
This is our whole conversation we're just having.
Doesn't matter, I mean, because you can't change it.
That's why I was saying
It doesn't-
before,
Just take that out.
I can't take that out.
No, the part below, you're saying, take it out, like we just said.
Oh,
part
the
below.
private public, just kind of
Yeah.
all of it the same one.
Because that
Yeah,
would,
for the charger.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
fine.
It's just worded very bad that says, you know, private is, you know, restricts to specific,
Mhm.
where the parking is restricted to specific use.
Yeah, so that's
So
the,
I don't know if that means like, you know, you have an assigned space in the condominium building. Yeah. So what does that do to
so
like?
if it's under those definitions, if it's a reserved space, if that's your space and it's a EV charger on it, it's a private space. It's private EV.
But he says, I don't think any of the EVs.
So they're non-reserved parking, so they become publicly accessible EVs.
Michael, what were you reading?
Right here,
Yeah, you read.
right before section 2, it defines publicly accessible ESVE, it's on page 3. It says publicly accessible EVSE shall be an EVSE that is publicly available, and then it says, for example, parking lot, public parking lots, et cetera, not including non-reserved parking and multifamily parking lots.
Okay.
like, for example, can I go charge at the Ocean Club?
Can you get in?
Non-reserved.
That's what I'm saying, like, because isn't that the
No,
example?
but it's for the rest, it's not reserved to any specific residence. So
Right, it's-
all the rest of that building is public.
So anyone that lives in
My
Ocean
laundry room
Club-
is public, but you can't come use it.
I see, so it's public to the residents,
Yeah.
and that's what that's referring to there. Yeah, that makes sense. It is confusing.
So everything basically besides one or two family homes with a charger is going to be publicly accessible.
Yes. Like, or unless
those
it's
EV spots
reserved.
are reserved.
Yes.
In paragraph 30-57.6, B4.
B4?
B4, it says, "The zoning officer and/or transportation manager shall enforce all signage." Should that be limited to one or the other, or do you think it's a good idea?
So that is something we can change, actually. We chose, me and the zoning officer chose to have both of us, so
Okay.
that either one of us could make that call. It just helped diversify the work.
Okay, just questioning as to, And then if you go on to C8, following along, it says permitting application solely for the installation of electric vehicle supply equipment shall not be subject to review based on parking requirements.
I'm sorry,
What?
C8.
Got it?
No.
We had B4,
Yeah.
okay? Now we go on down to, excuse me, paragraph 8.
Okay, it's under B, I'm sorry. Permitting application solely for the installation of electric
Yeah.
vehicle supply equipment permitted as an accessory use shall not be subject to review based on parking requirements. Yes, so how do you understand this? You don't have to do a site plan for the EV chargers. I think Beth, is that correct?
I'm sorry, say that again?
So I believe under this ordinance, you don't need a site plan. If you're gonna add chargers or something, you don't need a site plan approval.
Okay. But
Pretty
why
sure it's
should,
the same.
but why shouldn't the number of stations be based on the parking requirements?
Where? In a
Yeah,
development, like site plan application?
asking me.
No, actually, it's asking you. Are you referring to this in the context of site plan application?
Well, it says that shall not be, the installation shall not be subject to review based on the parking requirements. And I wonder why not?
So this is for something that's already existing. So this specific clause is if I already have a garage, I already have a home, I already have whatever lot, and I want to add EV chargers. I don't have to come back with a site plan to show you where they are, whatever they are, and that it doesn't change my park requirements when I add them, I believe.
Okay, so you're saying that if I want to add, if I have a parking lot, and I want to add 2 units, I can add 2 units. I'm not subject to the requirements of so many units.
Yeah, so that protects the city actually, because under this ordinance, the mandatory sections say that if you provide EV, it lowers your parking requirements. So
Okay.
an existing lot can't come to us and say, I'm putting 2 EV chargers in, I want to remove 3 spaces from the lot entirely. That protects that change.
Okay. Continuing on, let's see. We're down to paragraph E, going on to the next page, where it says, under EVSE parking,
That's number 3, there's a
Number
number 3, and it says,
3D,
Okay?
the first sentence just doesn't seem to hold together very well. I mean, I think I understand what you're saying here, but to me, I think that sentence needs to be rewritten to make it.
Well, particularly what about it? It's public parking pursuant to NJSA 4048-2.
Yeah,
Publicly accessible EVSE parking spaces shall be monitored by the municipality's police department and enforced in the same manner as any other parking.
Any other parking regulations?
You want to have regulations in there? Okay. So any other, that should be fine.
Okay. And then following over on,
Write that down before I forget. Sure, Jim, go ahead.
okay, you answered my question under, as we continued on, under E, about private parking, you answered that. And you answered the thing on the signing. You answered my next question on setting the fees. Okay, you also answered my final question.
Cool. Any other questions or any other concerns?
Anything else?
I had one. I know we can't change section 2, but I just want to make sure I understand. Section 2B5. So this is where it's talking about you don't need site plan approval to add EV spaces. So does that just mean if there's already a parking space, you don't need site plan approval to add EV equipment, or can people just add a parking space to their front yard and it doesn't need site plan approval?
No. Can't be.
Can't
That's
do
not
that.
possible.
Kind of how it reads.
It doesn't matter, it's not possible. A, you can't require site plan approval for 1 and 2 family residences in New Jersey, under the municipal land use law. B, this ordinance doesn't give them carte blanche to go locate that parking space in the front yard. That's a violation of the front yard setback ordinance, so they would need variance for that. That was exactly what we faced with the zoning board. So, and this does not give a green light that you can just locate a parking space anywhere you want on a piece of property, in terms of 1 or 2 family home. Yeah.
Should it be more specific? Right?
Well, you're looking at this one ordinance. This has to be interpreted in paramateria with all other applicable ordinances, zoning and development regulations. So that when an application is looked at, when it comes before a board for a variance and all of the various elements are going to be looked at. Not only this one ordinance, but all the other applicable provisions of the land development ordinance and zoning code. You'll see a whole picture. Here you're just seeing one area for one specific thing.
Well, the reason I specifically asked is it says, application for the development of the space shall not require variance relief pursuant to NJSA 4055 or any other law, rule, or regulation.
Where you, I got it.
Page 4, number 5.
Right.
Any
Okay,
other existing.
but that's in terms of use, okay, 4055D7. It has an accessory use. It has nothing to do with parking space dimensions, location of parking spaces. You just can't do a driveway cut and stick this thing in your front lawn because I use this as the hooking.
That's what I want to make sure that you can't.
No, you cannot, no.
Yeah, you're,
Zoning officers.
Yeah, they're permitted use, accessory uses, and permitted accessory structure in all zoning and use districts. That's fine. That means you can put the space in any district, but it doesn't mean that you can just put it any place you like.
I'd like to clarify, so it's not, if you want to add a space, if you're like adding a space, you can't add a space with this. If you
That's
have,
what I wanted to-
if you have a
that's what
space
I wanted
and you're
to make
making it EV, then you don't need a site approval. But if you were like, all right, I want to put a new space in here, I'll do it EV so I don't have to, no one has to look, that's not how that works.
That's what I thought it meant, but I just wanted to make sure that we weren't leaving a loophole open.
No,
People to-
it's converting an existing space to EV.
So why doesn't it say that? In other words, I was gonna say, should it be more specific about converting an existing space? But let's just say there's a development where the guy left space left open, just didn't put a parking space. But legally, if you looked at it, you could add another parking space.
That's,
You would still need site plan?
so like Jack was saying, this is only a screenshot, a clip of the rest of the picture. You can't, if you were gonna add new parking, you have to go for a site plan. Just because it says, I know, it's how it reads, I understand that.
Yeah, this is being read in isolation, but it has to be considered along with all other applicable regulations that are unaffected by this.
All right, does anybody have anything else that they would like to add to this? Or make changes? Because I think at this point we have 2 changes. All right.
Oh, I would like to say one more thing, because
Sure.
we're still going back and forth about this private-public situation. So now, oh no, sure, it shouldn't be a problem, because the way this is going to be worded is that you can't charge more than this amount.
Correct.
So if that should
You
be
cannot
0,
charge
then
more
that's
than.
fine, so never mind.
Anyone.
I'm taking back what I was going
The
to say.
simple language in the resolution would be the board makes the following recommendations. The first one would be, what version, page 9?
Yeah,
Page 9, section 6, recommend making no distinction between private and public.
As far as charging is concerned.
Yep.
You want the fee to be consistently applied to both.
Yep.
That's simple.
Exactly.
That's what you're looking for. Okay,
Okay, and add regulations for 3D. Okay.
And what's the regulation for that?
Oh, it's just the words,
Sorry.
parking versus parking
Yeah, Jim just
regulation.
wanted a sentence edited, he felt it wasn't clear. Section 3, letter D, where it covers how these public spaces will be enforced by our police. It says that they'll enforce the same as other parking. Jim would like to say enforce the same as other parking regulations.
Okay. I'll talk to them. When I draft this up.
Yeah, I think that comes down to the letter, but I think it should be okay.
Do you have anything else?
I do not.
You don't? Okay. Any other questions from the board members? Any comments from the board members? Okay. All right. Can I get a motion to approve this this EV ordinance with the 2 modifications that we had suggested that will be provided to the city council and for?
If I may?
Sure, go ahead.
Okay. It's a referral, so the motion should be, board recommends adoption of this with the following recommended edits,
Yes.
amendments. And the board also finds that it's consistent with the master as it exists.
That's fair.
And then this way, that's our task, and you still have your 2 recommendations. It's up to them whether or not they adopt it or
Okay. So it goes back to council with those
not. Yes.
2 changes
Yeah.
or suggestions.
Suggestions, and
Okay.
then if they modify their ordinance before they have public hearings on it, they do so.
I'll make
Unless
that
you feel
motion.
you want me to. Okay. Yes, no? No. Okay. All right, so Jen moved it?
Second.
Yes. Jen first, Jim second.
For
Okay.
the vote,
Both.
James
James isn't going to vote.
is not voting. Just
He
wanted to
made a
make sure.
presentation on behalf of the city.
Just want to make sure.
No,
Okay.
he's not.
Councilwoman Clayton,
Yes.
Eric Gallipo,
Yes.
Jim Henry,
Yes.
Daniel Shinameo,
Yes.
Jen Souter,
Yes.
Michael Goonan,
Yes.
and Chairwoman Kurzak.
Yes.
Okay, so we have 1 abstention.
Okay, next item is the Asbury Park Housing Element and Fair Share Plan.
All right.
You're up to bat.
All right, can I just make a statement to the public? I just want to make sure that
Yeah.
you're here, the only thing that we're hearing today is the Asbury Park Housing Element and the vote for the Planning Board Vice Chair, just so you know, that those are the 2 topics that we're on. That's what's left. Just so you know. You're welcome to stay.
Okay, folks, give me 1 second to set up a presentation. Okay, here we go. So folks, tonight we're doing a public hearing on the Housing Element Fair Share Plan. I've got this brief presentation.
Introduce yourself, please.
Thank you. Thank you. My name is Beth McManus. I'm the city's planning consultant. I'm a principal at Kyle McManus Associates, but I also do a lot of work here in Asbury Park. I think most folks probably just think I'm familiar with this one.
Let's get you sworn. So we heard testimony about giving this map, we truth, the whole truth.
I do.
Before you state your name for the record, you tell us who you are, what you do. That's good. You're up.
Ready to go? Okay. So let's see. Jack,
Now we
would you like?
introduce whatever it is that you want the board to consider.
We are going to introduce the affidavit of service that was provided
We'll put in
by.
the proofs.
Yeah.
This was properly noticed and served on, since it's a master plan amendment, there's certain requirements. That's in that packet, I reviewed it today, submitted by Michelle Alonso. So let's make that C1,
C1?
that whole packet. And then C2 would be the actual proposed amendment that you're going to be discussing.
Yep.
Okay.
So we have the amendment, it's dated September 7th of this year, and I'm planning a brief, some context, and then an overview of what's contained in the plan. So first, just for a little bit of context, and I can answer a lot of questions about this if folks would like, so I'm going to move through this quickly.
The reason why we're doing this in New Jersey generally is because we have New Jersey Supreme Court cases in 1975 and 1983 referred to collectively as the Mount Laurel cases, or Mount Laurel 1 and 2. And these decisions really did two things. They first said that municipalities can't use their power to zone in order to exclude households of low and moderate incomes. And then they also, in their second decision, the Mount Laurel 2 decision, provided a little bit more clarity, or substantially more clarity. And they said it's not that you just can't exclude them, you actually have a number that you must satisfy. And that is where municipal affordable housing obligations came from. That process then was in the courts, similar to what we have today. It was a bit chaotic. New Jersey legislature adopted the Fair Housing Act. In order to correct that chaos, they created the Council on Affordable Housing, and then all of the municipalities moved to the Council on Affordable Housing. That state agency administered affordable housing in New Jersey for a couple decades, and they did pretty well. It wasn't perfect, but towns got obligations, they wrote housing plans, and they were approved by the state agency. That's how it was supposed to work. And the reason why municipalities go through COA, or now we're going through the courts, they do that because they want to avoid builder's remedy litigation, and that is where a developer or a landowner sues a municipality that is not compliant with their affordable housing obligation and says essentially to the courts, this town is not compliant, they are exclusionary, they're excluding low and moderate income households, but I, developer or property owner, can help rectify this issue if only the court would grant me high density inclusionary zoning on the property. And so what developers look for, it's different in every town, but in every case, it's something that the municipality is not looking for, not interested in. Either it's residential where commercial is permitted, or maybe it's just simply too dense for what the municipality had been looking for. So going through this process gives a municipality, if you go through successfully, like we are, gives us immunity from such litigation. Developers, property owners can't sue the town and can't successfully tell the court that, in this case, Asbury Park is being exclusionary. Instead, we're going through this process, principally tonight, meaning adopting a housing element fair share plan so that we can enjoy immunity from that type of litigation. And there are some other benefits I'll go through as well, but getting protection from builder's remedy is the primary advantage to municipalities. As I said, we had the Fair Housing Act, and through that process of setting up COA, what that did was it created a mechanism to calculate the municipal affordable housing obligation and also how it is that the town can satisfy it. So it gave a lot of guidance and assistance to the municipalities. You identify that obligation, you satisfy it through a fair share plan or a housing element fair share plan, and that's precisely what we're talking about this evening. The process today, because in 2015 our state agency was declared essentially moribund by the state Supreme Court, finding that COA is just not doing its job, to put it very simply. And the courts told the towns, you can't wait for the state agency to get its act together, you just have to go to the court. So they did that in 2015. And what's happening now throughout the state, including Asbury Park, is municipalities are sort of raising their hand to the court. They're filing what's called a declaratory judgment. And it says, essentially, dear judge, we want to comply. We want protection from builder's remedy, and we want to satisfy our affordable housing obligation. Asbury Park did that a handful of years ago at this point, and we've been working through the process. The process is now that you execute settlement agreements addressing your affordable housing obligation with a nonprofit, Fair Share Housing Center. They are the lead in this litigation across the state. And that settlement agreement, which Asbury Park has done, is already complete. It identifies our affordable housing obligation and what we're going to do to satisfy it. We also have this little wrinkle regarding our RCA program that I'm going to talk about too. And once we go through our process of adopting the housing plan, presuming the planning board does that tonight and the council follows through with an endorsement, we then go to the court. The court reviews and should approve our housing element fair share plan and give us a final seal of approval, which means more specifically is a judgment of repose. And that means through the end of the third round, we have protection from builder's remedy litigation.
Third round ends in 2025, unfortunately, but that's just, there's nothing to be done about that. Every municipality in the state, if it desires to continue in this process, will have to redo this in 2025. That said, I expect it to be much more simple for municipalities because you've been through it, and we all, the professionals, the judges, have an understanding of how this works and how it works well.
Does that
So
always change though? Like, so you said 2025, you have to do it again.
you'll have a new obligation.
Yeah, how long will
It'll be 10 years. So it was 2015 to 2025 for this third round that we're in. Essentially, there's some nuance that I won't bore you guys with, but 2015 to 2025, and then it'll be 2025 to 2035. So for that 10-year period.
And it's not the court that tells you how many units you need, it's this not-for-profit that you go with, and either the court says yea or nay?
It's supposed to be a state agency, but since that agency has failed to do its job, what's ended up happening is the nonprofit has done its calculations. Municipal organizations, like groups of municipalities got together, did their calculations. And so for years, from 2025 through 2018, towns were really just fighting and butting heads with Fair Share Housing Center. They might get a settlement that shows a number in between. But eventually, when a couple of municipalities in Mercer County could not settle with Fair Share, it ended up going to court. And so in Mercer County, we have a 200-page decision that laid out how the methodology, how the calculation of the obligation should be done. What's happened is that obligation has largely just been relied upon for any town that had not settled. So to answer your question, it's not straightforward, of course, like anything in this field. We had a handful, honestly, of competing obligations, competing calculations. Most towns found a way to settle on that number with Fair Share. You know, maybe the municipal number was 500 and Fair Share's number was 700, and everybody said, fine, we'll do 600. So that was a common type of settlement. But once we had that court decision that approved, gave a very well thought out decision on the correct methodology, it's just been relied upon. So it's still a settlement, but it's simply that the parties have just simply agreed to utilize that court's finding. It's not that the court has given it to municipalities or has taken that power from the nonprofit. It's just been a convenient way to organize a settlement. And so the court does need to approve it. They approve the settlement agreement that sets forth what the obligation is, but they're not creating it.
But we do have Asbury
Yes.
Park does have an obligation.
Yes, and I'm going to talk
Because
to
for
you.
many years, we took money, right, when you could.
Yeah, let me get into, I'll show you the nuance in the way that these obligations interact. Yeah. So, and actually, right now. So, there are two categories of municipal affordable housing obligations. The first one is the rehabilitation obligation. This is an estimate of the number of substandard units in a municipality that are occupied by low and moderate income households. Here in Asbury Park, we actually did our own survey. That means that we sent your construction official through every single street of the city, and he marked, based on, it's called a windshield survey, he marked what he saw from the street, and that's all that's required. You know, is the roof in an okay shape, is the porch in okay shape, etc. Based on that survey, our rehabilitation obligation is 243 units.
I'm sorry, I gotta ask you another question. So how do you know, so when you go through the street and look at the, crappy building, how do you know it's low or moderate income?
So you don't. So technically, the number that was counted was 344 units, I believe. I believe that's correct. So you count the number of units that appear to be deficient based on that windshield survey, and then you apply a ratio. And there's a ratio different for every county, but it's the estimate number of substandard units in a tri-county region that are occupied by low and moderate income households. And in this region, or I'm sorry, this is done by county. In this county, it's estimated that 70% of substandard units are occupied by low and moderate income households. So that's how we went from 344 to 243. So it's an estimate. I want to be very clear, it's just an estimate, but it's more accurate than the census data that's typically utilized to generate a rehabilitation obligation.
So that's the first category of obligation. The second category is referred to as new construction obligation, and that number is organized by round. There's a prior round obligation and then a third round obligation. However, Asbury Park is and has been a qualified urban aid municipality, and that means we have zero new construction obligation. And so when we talk about our affordable housing obligation consistent with the COA rules and the court decision, it's just that one number, that rehabilitation obligation.
So, may I ask a question? It seems agnostic to whether it's rental or owned.
For the rehabilitation obligation, it is. It simply must be available to renter and owner occupied units, but you're not obligated to do a certain percentage of each. So, but what's unique in Asbury, in addition to being an urban aid municipality, we also have this RCA issue, as I will lovingly refer to it as. So over the years, we took money from 6 municipalities in order to conduct RCAs. It was intended to be a rehabilitation program, essentially, where, for example, Howell Township sent the city a few dozen affordable housing units. The city would operate a rehabilitation program, and as we rehabilitated units, we would be essentially fulfilling Howell's affordable housing obligation. That program was not run particularly well, and through this court process, all of our files on the RCA program have been reviewed, and what's been found is that we have 136 units that were completed, but they had the Fair Share Housing Center has identified a defect. So think about one easy example, one big category of this is rental units whose landlords applied to the program because they have low or a moderate income household in the unit. They applied to the program successfully, they received money to, let's say, put on a new roof and fix the porch, just as 2 examples. In exchange for accepting that money, they were required to apply a deed restriction for 10 years. And so for that 10-year period, that meant that they could only rent to qualified low and moderate income households. But unfortunately, what happened in some cases was the landlords took the money, improved the units, raised the rent well beyond low and moderate income households, and then those households were obviously unable to pay the rent, they had to move. So that is one of our categories of defects here. We have 136 of those.
That's in addition to the rehabilitation?
Yes, in addition.
And do those rehabilitation units include the city's public housing?
No. They're not counted, if that's, it's not included in generating the obligation, they were not counted in that way.
That's 136 units in Asbury Park or within this consortium of towns?
It's
Asbury
136
Park.
units of the units that these towns sent to Asbury Park, 136 of them were done improperly.
I'm sorry, how does somebody send a unit?
They enter an agreement, and so Howell, for example, and Asbury Park entered into an agreement, and Howell's, I forget the number of units, but Howell said, Asbury Park, you're going to fulfill 50 units of our affordable housing obligation. And so if you look at Howell's housing element, you see RCA to Asbury Park.
So they gave
they
funding.
Yes, and
Funding
they
to
paid,
do the
yes,
rehabilitations here.
yes, and they paid money in exchange.
Money, they gave money.
Yes.
Yeah, so they paid to have the obligation sent to Asbury Park.
Seems so shady.
It is, I will say, it is now no longer a permitted program in the state.
But, and were those only rental units?
No, they're rental and for sale. A lot of the ones with the defects were rental, but the category as a whole are for rent and for sale.
So it's basically, the owner then would apply to the program, get money to make repairs, and some of them did.
I'm sure they made the repairs, but what they didn't do was put in place a proper deed restriction. They did, if it was a rental unit, that means that they did not keep the rents low for that lower moderate income household. And if it was a sale unit, the deed restriction was not properly applied. And so instead of selling, if you're a qualified low income household, you get money for, let's say, your roof and your porch, you have a 10-year deed restriction. That means that within those 10 years, if you want to sell the unit, you must sell it at a low or moderate income price. So if you accepted money as a low income household, you are not able to sell your house at the maximum market value
you have to sell it at a low income price point, which might be roughly,
To a
say, $100,000.
To a qualified
To a
buyer.
qualified buyer,
Yeah.
correct.
But that was all set, but the price was, so at the different points in time.
I mean, what's,
So I want to go to that. So what's our remedy for the people that?
I'm getting there, I'm getting there.
Sorry,
So look,
I have a question
we
too
have-
before you get to remedy.
Yeah, hold on, just let me give you the world of RCA's. We have 136 that were done improperly. We have 70 that were not complete, so it's a total of 206 RCA units. So it's our world of affordable housing obligations, our requirements is a 243 rehabilitation obligation and a 206 unit RCA remedy.
So my question, I know it's not what this whole thing's about, but just if you can answer, because RCA, as long as, 14 years, 15 years I lived here, I always heard the RCA program and wondered about its implementation, but the 10-year deed restriction, who administers that? Like, what's the check on that?
For moving forward or in the
No,
past?
in the past, like how we got to this situation.
It was an in-house operated program, and so what folks are, if you're an owner of a unit, you're obligated to fulfill the program requirements, which include application of the deed restriction, and then upon either re-renting or reselling, you're obligated to communicate and coordinate with the city on the new tenants or the new sales prices. And it seems that there were many reasons why these units were not properly implemented. At times it was because the deed restriction was not in place, or because the deed restriction was not strong enough and folks were able to sell it or rent it to a non-qualified household.
Somebody wasn't looking. That's. Well, you said the obligation is 206, so I'm a little confused. We did some of them, we just didn't do 70 of them, right?
Yes, that's correct. Yeah, there were a substantial number that were complete, but we have 136 that seem to have been done incorrectly and 70 that were not done.
Oh.
So do we know how many were done
Correctly?
correctly?
6 that were not done correctly.
I forget that number, to be honest, I'm sorry.
Okay.
Yeah, there were many that were done properly, so I don't want to suggest that the program is a complete failure. There were none done improperly, but there were a substantial number that are in need of remedy or completion.
Oh, so we got more than 200, we got paid for more than
Correct.
206.
Correct. Okay. So 243 rehab, 206 RCA. Let's talk about what we're going to do to fix that. So first, I want to say the reason why we're doing this, certainly we want to promote affordable housing, we want to protect against builder's remedy, but frankly, we need to remedy the RCA problem. That's going to, the biggest benefit to this process is being able to properly address the RCA problem and insulate, to the extent possible, litigation on that. The result of having these goals is we have an MOU, a memorandum of understanding with the Housing Authority, which will, the reason why will become clear in a few minutes, and we have a settlement agreement with Fair Share Housing Center. Our settlement agreement with Fair Share Housing Center is, as I described at the outset, it's a document that sets forth the obligation and what we're going to do to satisfy it. The MOU with the Housing Authority goes into details of exactly how we're going to satisfy it. But let's start with the rehabilitation obligation. So it's going to be satisfied through one program, and that is continuation of a home rehabilitation program. It's going to be available to income qualified households that are either owner occupied or renter occupied. The program fundamentally is providing money to qualified households to replace a major system. So heating, roofs, porch, windows, doors, etc., that are out of code compliance. The program is going to be operated not by an in-house department, but rather by the city's Affordable Housing Administrative Agent, which is an organization called Community Grants Housing and Planning, CGP&H, very good, well-known organization, and folks that have helped us sort through all of the RCA documents, so they're very familiar with the city. And these units will indeed have 10 years of affordability controls. And the one thing I want to point out about the RCA program, so we have 243 units that our obligation is for this part of our plan, but it's important to note that we are not required to complete all 243 units. We are required to make the program available to 243 units. And so the distinction I'm making is we're not gonna be knocking on folks' doors saying, your roof is in poor shape, tell us how much money you make, and if so, you're going to participate in this program. It is purely voluntary. And the obligation ends, we'll get a new rehabilitation obligation in 2025. And so while our program will be available for as many households that are qualified to apply, I personally think the likelihood of completing all 243 in less than 2 years is quite low. And that's perfectly okay and compliant as long as we do our best to market the program to everybody.
I'm sorry for asking so many
That's
questions.
okay.
This is the rehabilitation, not
Correct.
the RCA.
Correct.
Okay. And this is, again, these are existing, deficient.
Existing units, yes.
So what's the deal with creating new affordable housing units, right? How is there no one canceling out the other? What's the deal? So we have no, from what I understand daily, from the prior litigation, not 101, 2, and
Correct.
maybe 2.5, 3, is that we have no prior obligation.
Correct.
But we are creating new affordable housing units. Does any of that get, used to credit?
Like the projects that you guys are actually approving as part of site plan approval, how are we using those?
Oh,
Is
yeah,
that your
we're having
question?
40% here,
Yep.
25% here. So whatever those units are, right? However many, it's 50 units. Does that get credited towards any of these obligations?
It
And
will.
why not?
It will. They will be eligible for credit, but I have not used them in this housing plan for a couple of reasons. One, I know that we can fully satisfy our rehabilitation obligation by simply operating the rehabilitation program. And there's an ongoing goal in the city to help improve deficient housing units. And so we have, regardless of what the obligation is, we have a goal to improve deficient housing units. So let's run a rehabilitation program. And it seems that we can also satisfy the rehabilitation obligation while doing so. We did not use those other units, such as the 1012 Asbury site with the 40% affordable housing. I did not, you'll see, I did not use that to satisfy the RCA issue because, frankly, just by virtue of negotiations with Fair Share Housing Center and what they were asking for and the trajectory of the settlement negotiations. That said, if and when the city gets a new construction obligation for the fourth round, I don't anticipate that at the moment, but that could happen. Those units will be able to satisfy that new construction obligation. And if the city decides, we'll have the ability to put these approved units, we can use it to satisfy our rehabilitation obligation if we so choose in the fourth round. There doesn't seem to be much utility to do that at this point for the third round, and so the plan doesn't propose that.
So not to sound like Ebenezer Scrooge, but why, if we've already identified what we need to do in terms of RCA and rehabilitation, why are we creating new affordable housing units if we don't have a requirement?
Because in negotiations with Fair Share Housing Center, they were very much looking for a 100% affordable housing project in order to cure the RCA program, and having it be affiliated with the city and the Housing Authority, as you'll see in a moment, gives us the ability to implement a certain component, which is resident preference, which we would not be able to accomplish through another project. We don't have the level of control necessary in order to direct the occupancy of the unit in, say, a project operated by a private developer.
So how is the money for like these rehabilitations going? Well, let's just talk about the rehabilitation. So you go down and you see what needs to be done. Is somebody estimating, so somebody can apply and say, okay, I want to do it. Somebody has estimated the costs then for that particular structure?
It will be estimated. You don't need to have an estimate at the time of application. You just simply fill out the forms, indicate your income, a variety of questions to qualify you, and what improvements you believe are necessary, but then it moves into a stage where the city, or really the administrative agent, would coordinate with contractors in order to identify the home improvements necessary, what the cost would be.
Well, how do we know if we have enough money to do it?
It's one of the documents in your appendices is a spending plan, and in there I provided an estimate of money. But that said, I think it's important to note that one, We have a 2-year time horizon on the 243 units, and so I think it's reasonable to assume that we're not going to get 243 successful applications between now and then. But more importantly, any program that requires funding by a municipality, whether it's a not RCA, but a rehabilitation program, new construction obligation, accessory apartments, any program that's eligible for credit, a municipality is required to fund. We have a spending plan where we've estimated the amount of funding, but if it's inadequate, the municipality is always required to pull from general revenue, no matter what.
And so I assume that in your budget, you assume it's not all 243 units or 46 units.
Yes, but really the purpose of the spending plan is just simply to indicate how much money is anticipated to be collected and how we'll spend it, rather than estimate the full cost of a program. Those are actually two separate things. The city collects development fees for residential and non-residential development. That money is deposited into the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. The spending plan simply addresses the trust fund. If the city has other money it plans to make available for affordable housing, that is not the appropriate place to address it in the spending plan. The spending plan is specifically for an affordable housing trust fund and the regulated monies that are to be deposited in that account.
So this is money that we have already for that purpose.
But we want to develop other affordable housing because we want to develop other affordable housing. Like,
Yeah.
it shouldn't be, we shouldn't be thinking about new affordable housing as an offset to the remedies we should be providing for these units who have not been completed, nor the obligation of the 243 units, correct?
Why not?
Right, we should be
Yes.
creating affordable housing in every nook and cranny that we
If
can.
that is it, yeah, I mean, my understanding is the city desires to promote affordable housing. That can and should continue on its own track. And one of the terms of our settlement, one of the items that you see in our housing plan is that the city is committed to maintaining its inclusionary zoning.
Yeah.
And so that will continue. When the fourth round hits in 2025, if the city decides it wants to proceed in this process into a fourth round process, we'll then be able to revisit this concept of not taking credit for your new construction. We'll be in a very different circumstance at that point, knock on wood, having remedied the RCA issue, and we'll be able to have more flexibility and think a bit more holistically about our affordable housing planning as opposed to simply how do we fix the RCA problem and how do we satisfy the rehabilitation obligation? Because I want to be clear, we as in Clark Hayden Hints, I had prepared a 2019 housing element and fair share plan for you folks. And at that time, the purpose of that plan was really to promote affordable housing and to think about housing in the city. At that time, you had not entered the court process, so it was truly a master plan element that addressed housing and affordable housing. This document, I have to say, is less planning and more a direct response to two settlement agreements and the court process that we are already engaged in and the steps that we are required to take in order to get that judgment proposed. I'm a planner, but I gotta say there's not that much planning in this document. This is almost more of a legal document as we sort through just how we accomplish these two tasks, rehab and RCA. Fix that, we can think holistically about planning and housing when we get our fourth round obligation if the city is inclined to continue down that path.
Does this plan include how this is going to be enforced so we don't run into the problems that we ran into before?
Yeah,
There's got to be dedicated staff to this issue to check that these things get done. Otherwise, it's throwing good money after bad.
Yeah, and that's one of the reasons why we have the rehabilitation program being operated by CGP&H. And so we have an outside third-party entity who has a ton of experience operating a rehabilitation program. Your settlement agreement addressing the RCA fix, so to speak, that I'll go through in a minute, also has additional terms set forth about administration to ensure no future problems.
So this
CGP&H, they're community grants, housing and planning, they're affordable housing administrators. They specialize in working with developers and municipalities to place income qualified households and to just generally help administer affordable housing units.
But I'm talking about that the renovations get done, you give the people the money, somebody's gonna check that the money was spent, and that the deed restrictions are done and stuff.
Yes, and in addition, sorry, in our settlement agreement with Fair Share, one of the other terms in there are certain provisions regarding monitoring, annual monitoring, to submit information about what units have been completed, and so that's an additional check to ensure that the city's operating the programs properly.
So this firm does the monitoring and the checking?
They submit documents so that the city can submit the monitoring to the court. The court and Fair Share Housing Center actually review it to confirm they're satisfied with our compliance.
So they give documents to the city doesn't check them, they give them to the court. It's the court checks.
They give documents to the city, specifically if I'm still working for the city, it'll come to me, I'll review it to make sure it satisfies all of our various requirements. Or addresses each of the projects they're required to address. Then I will work with the city attorneys in order to properly submit that to Fair Share Housing Center as well as to Superior Court.
You know, I'm talking about more than, you know, of course you need the deed restrictions and the agreements with the rental. I'm talking about that, the actual physical improvements are done.
Oh, I'm sorry, the physical improvements. Well, yes, all of the physical improvements will require the same permits and inspections, just like any other house here in the city. And I will say, we had a lot of RCA problems, but I'm not familiar with projects where the improvements were not completed. It's really about administration of the deed restriction and the occupancy of the units. But to confirm that, say, a roof or a porch was done to code, it'll have city inspection.
Oh, it's not like Lake Ave.
Well, fingers crossed.
I have one quick question before you. You mentioned appendices that we had, but was that something emailed?
Sorry, can you say that again?
The appendices?
Would it be in this?
I just didn't hear the question.
I was saying the appendices referred to.
The appendices is this document. I don't believe they were printed for board members because, quite frankly, they're very, very long.
They're in the link in the file. They're,
On the link. Oh, I thought they were in what you emailed today. Never mind.
it's quite large.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's talk about your RCA. So, big picture, we're going to do a new affordable housing project that cures the RCA problem, generally. The project will be located on a property I know is the home plate property at the corner of Memorial, Springwood, Prospect, sort of Langford as well. And it's the vacant lot adjacent to the existing Lincoln Village. And
Who owns
so,
that? Sorry, that was one thing I didn't see. Who owns the home care property now?
the city owns it.
Okay.
And so the way the program will ultimately work is there will be 132 units created within the vacant property as well as the existing Lincoln Village site. And so Lincoln Village is owned by the Housing Authority. It's in need of substantial repair. The Housing Authority has proposed to do is to work with the city in order to accomplish two things. First one is replacement of the Lincoln Village units, of which there are 63. And the second is to cure our RCA problem with 69 affordable units. Now, 69 is obviously a lot less than 206. And so the way that we have settled with Fair Share Housing Center is not through a one-for-one replacement of the 206 affordable units. Instead, it's a replacement of the affordability controls. So those 206 units were obligated to be affordable for 10 years. And so instead of doing 10 years, 206 units with 10 years, we're going to do a third of those units, at least 69, and each of those units will have affordability controls for 30 years. So that will result in the same number of years of affordable housing with a lesser number of units. This is a really unique strategy that has happened in a couple of other municipalities. Asbury Park was able to utilize it in its settlement agreement in order to address, yes, the big RCA problem, but it also helped us deal with what we knew the Housing Authority's intention was to improve or replace the Lincoln Village units. And so the project will be phased, and essentially the new units will be constructed on the vacant property. The residents of Lincoln Village will be given an opportunity to move to the new site with one of the terms of our settlement being continuous affordable housing for those existing residents. We certainly are not going to support a project where we're just evicting the 63 residents on that, or households on that property. So folks will be given an opportunity to obtain a new unit in the new development. Once that new project is constructed, the old Lincoln Village is vacated. That project, the Lincoln Village Old, will be demolished, and it will be replaced with an additional phase of this development that will, all told, include at least 132 units. In addition, one of the other really important terms to this is that we're going to be giving preference to any household or resident that was living in an RCA unit and was harmed by the poor administration. So essentially, if you lived in an RCA unit and your landlord jacked up the rent after they got money from the city, you'll be given a priority in order to obtain a new affordable housing unit on the property. And that is really, really unique, because there are probably dozens of municipalities across the state that have tried to get a residency preference of some sort, and they have failed because it's just frankly antithetical to that moral doctrine. But here, because of our really unique circumstance with the RCA program and the desire to remedy not just the affordability controls, but to actually provide a remedy to the people that were harmed, we were able to get this residency preference for folks. And so there'll be a notice, there'll be searches in order to identify those folks, and that will happen through the help with the city, the housing authority, and CGP&H in order to identify potential tenants. And then money that was set aside for the RCA program that the city has will be used to help subsidize this program as well.
So the 69 units will satisfy the 206?
Correct.
Who's building this?
It's a housing authority project, although there'll be some coordination with the city. And there are additional terms that they are obligated to comply with that they might not normally comply with.
So the housing authority will build the 69 units? And I assume,
Yeah.
so the housing authority, the city's paying?
Well, hold on, let me just correct one thing. I don't know if the housing authority literally will do it, but they will partner with the developer, is more specifically what I expect.
Okay.
It'll be a housing authority-led development, but there'll be a developer that will actually do the planning and the construction of the project.
And when I was talking about remedies before, so I know this is part of the remedy, but I was really talking about clawback that people did not.
Yeah, it's the residency preference.
Well, no.
Yeah.
I'm talking about to the people who did not do what they should do.
Oh, I'm sorry, to the landlords.
To the landlords or to the owners, because they could have been fee owners, right?
Mm-hmm.
That sold their house. Are we having litigation to claw back and some back of that money?
I probably need to defer to the city attorney on that, but I think in many cases, and we also have an affordable housing council as well. But in many cases, the problem was actually an improperly applied deed restriction. And so I'm not sure that there's a remedy from the landlords that we're going to be able to collect if that's the case.
Could claw back? They should have filed a deed. Should they be sued?
If they were clearly obligated to file the deed restriction, yes. There are instances where the deed restriction was not properly enforced by the city. It was not properly required by the city. And so in those instances, we may not be able to obtain a remedy from the landlords.
But again, you're saying go to this outside company or not-for-profit that's going to administer, we're going to not have those problems if somebody not doing what they're supposed to do in the city.
There's no guarantees in life, but there's no firm that I would feel more comfortable with than CGP&H to run the city's administration.
But somebody has to check that too, right?
Yes, and so the city will provide its own, CGP&H will conduct the monitoring where they fill out a variety of information. That'll be submitted to the city, it'll be reviewed by my office, it would also be reviewed by the city's Affordable Housing Council. Once we're satisfied with it, once city officials are satisfied with it, it would then be submitted to the court, to Fair Share Housing Center. If they had concerns, I I assure you they will not be shy.
So when you say city officials, is that the council?
No, it does not require,
So you said the Affordable Housing Council will look at it, you'll look at it, and city officials, if they're satisfied. Who's the city officials?
I just mean city staff. Most likely, city manager or any other staff member that's in charge of affordable housing for the city.
What about, is there a timeline or a deadline to fill this RCA application?
Yes, it is, it is anticipated that construction will start within 2 years. However, there's some flexibility built in because there's an acknowledgement that outside sources of funding will be applied for. The Housing Authority and the developer will likely apply for low-income housing tax credits, which are only offered once, maybe twice a year. And so while I would say in general, it's important that we move forward as quickly as possible on construction, the reality is that we're going to be making funding applications, and it's going to be a bit of a hurry up and wait situation where we hurry up, get the funding application, wait for, hopefully for the funding to come through and proceed with construction. But we're obligated to hold the waiting list for the RCA preference, household preference for 4 years, just to give you another sense of timing. Okay. And so, as I said, one of the last terms in the settlement agreement is just, and as well as what's addressed in your housing plan, is just simply that we maintain our existing inclusionary housing. We did substantial inclusionary amendments in 2019, and I think all in 2019. We're just simply required to keep those in place and keep doing the good work that this board and the city has been doing. And so the next steps, if the planning board decides to adopt this master plan element, it will then go to council. I'll ask the council to endorse it. That's not an adoption, it's just simply a resolution that says we approve this plan to be submitted to court. There are a handful of other resolutions that will be necessary as well. But ultimately, take this package, submit it to court. We have a fairness hearing to approve the settlement agreements, a compliance hearing scheduled on the same day, a joint hearing to have our housing plan approved. Presumably, they will approve it at that hearing, and then we will get our judgment of repose along with our immunity from builder's remedy litigation, and we'll be done until July 2025. So with that, any additional questions? Yes?
I have a question. So regarding the retention of the existing inclusionary zones, this doesn't, if in the next revision of the city's master plan and the subsequent revisions of the zoning ordinance, we can expand our inclusionary zones, correct?
Yes, these are meant to be minimums.
Right, okay,
Yeah.
so we can't reduce them, but we can add more and
Correct.
change and maybe the ADUs and
Yeah, the ADUs, they're proceeding on their own track. You won't find them addressed in the housing plan, and it's not because it's not relevant to housing, it's just simply not a term required by Fair Share Housing Center. I would recommend the city continue to implement that program.
Could you put up the map of inclusionary housing? And just, I'm familiar with inclusionary housing
Yeah.
zones in New York City. That's great. Maybe you can help me, what does that mean?
Inclusionary housing is just simply a development, or inclusionary zoning is zoning that requires a mix of market rate and affordable units. So you often see projects that come before you would say a 20% set aside. That's an inclusionary development.
No, I understand that, but, you know that like this inclusionary housing bonuses, and when you have an inclusionary district in New York City, you can't buy certificates anymore, but you can get an increase in density if you include that. So what's the carrots here?
So, one, the zoning is already in place. So the
Where
carrots.
is it on here?
If you see all the areas on the map that are highlighted by a thicker black dotted line, like for example, along Deal Lake Drive up north, or the B zones, or the CBD district.
And is that Memorial, the Home Game District?
Yeah, that includes
It's the
that Park
business
Memorial
districts.
Main. It's a Main Street
Shows all
redevelopment area.
it's all business
Bonuses
districts.
reach.
And all-
So they get bonuses, okay.
Yeah, the bonuses are built into the zoning. So for example, your B district, when we had done your 2019 housing plan, I think it had a limitation of 4 units on a property, period. You could do 4 units. zoning was amended to allow for a density of up to 40 units an acre. So it was a substantial rewrite of the B district that also included affordable housing.
And then I assume they get the ability to apply for the long-term tax abatements. They wouldn't pay school taxes.
No, if you're in a redevelopment area, you have the ability, the city has the ability to grant a pilot. And I want to be clear, they have the ability, not the obligation to grant a pilot. That's the only way they would get a long-term tax abatement, unless you're a 100% affordable housing project, but let's just put that in a different category because we're not talking about that. If you were an inclusionary property owner, your taxes would be, if you have 100 units on a property and 20 of those are affordable, your taxes would be less than if all 100 were market rate. But it's not, I don't want to characterize that as a tax abatement. That's just simply the market value of the project is less because 20 of the units have lower rents.
Okay, so it's their assessment, their market value.
Correct.
Assessment.
Yes.
They're gonna pay school taxes.
Yes, they pay school taxes just like any other property.
I've got a bunch of questions.
Can I just
Sure.
say something first? What you're looking for, I just want to clarify what you're looking for today. It's not like we can make changes to any of this. This is what is being proposed by the city because of different cases that may have gone on. And here is the resolution of the, not a resolution, but here's where you've landed. So you're just kind of like saying, here it is, and there you go. You're not really like saying, oh, I would like to change, page 5 of, 3,000.
Yeah, I have
You know-
to say that the cake is baked. in
Right, it's already
terms of the
baked. You're just
programs.
letting us know what the cake is,
Yeah.
how it was made, why it was made, and we're just here to say, thank you.
Yeah, I hate to say that. Normally, I would never, I would never say that.
I'm
before,
just
but-
saying.
But the reality is my goal, my job was to prepare a housing plan that implemented the 2 agreements.
Right.
And that's what
And
this
and it's
does.
not
The
like we can
agreements are done.
change that.
Yeah, I would really, look, the reality is the planning board can decide not to adopt a housing plan. That is very much
Okay.
within your.
It's our jurisdiction to adopt or not adopt and make
Exactly.
changes. So we're obviously the board's relying on you that we're given very little wiggle room. So
Right.
the board has to know
It's either yes or
that
no.
that what's being proposed is proper and will resolve the situation that the city finds itself.
Correct.
I don't want the liability, I don't want somebody to claim the planning board didn't do its job because they just so-called rubber stamped something and because it was a settlement and all that, because then we're remiss under our statutory duties to do a thorough investigation and vet out all the issues when you do the master plan originally or any amendments. So this is a direct result of litigation. If we change something, the ripple effect goes right through and you go right back to square one where you are and your settlements and so on that are on the table with these various lawsuits that are pending and obligations with the courts and various agencies, RCA and the like, will be a virtual nightmare. Correct?
Yeah,
Look,
correct.
I'm the board attorney.
Yes.
And my client, let's be frank. That's
Yeah.
the bottom line is, we gotta be frank. I want my client to understand what's going on and why we're doing what we're doing.
Yeah, if we can't implement the settlement agreements through a compliant housing plan, those settlement agreements will be very much in danger and we could be back to square one.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. All right, so I'm sorry that Jim was,
Yeah, I've got a bunch of questions. Some of them are maybe repetitive, but I just want to understand exactly what's going on. In round 3, that was from 99 to 2015, correct?
Technically, round 3 is from 1999 through 2025. It was supposed to be a 10-year period. It should have been from 2000 to 2010. However, COA failed to adopt rules, or they failed to have rules that would not be overturned by the courts. There was a lot of litigation. Ultimately, the 3rd round was not resolved and was supposed to be a 10-year period. And so the courts extended it essentially from 2015, when there was that big New Jersey Supreme Court decision referred to as Mount Laurel 4. They said the 10-year period is going to go from 2015 through 2025, was referred to then as the prospective period. And then the the gap period from 99 through 2015 was also incorporated into the third round. So we have an odd situation with a 26-year third round right now. But the fourth round, hopefully we don't have similar litigation, will just be a 10-year period.
And what's your best guess for the fourth round, what Asbury Park's obligation is going to be? Do you think we're still at zero?
I do. I have not seen any movement to changing which municipalities are qualified urban aid municipalities. That said, I can't guarantee, but I don't see movement right now
Don't
to,
expect it.
yeah.
Down the road from there.
Yeah.
Okay,
We will have a new rehabilitation obligation now.
okay. Up until 2019, I think this is right out of your report, Asbury Park created 1,687 affordable units, approximately. Am I understanding that correct?
Yes.
Correctly? Okay. And when you did your projections, you did not include any of those units,
Correct.
okay? And I think you, in answer to Dan's question, you said you were leaving those alone so that in the future, you may try to use some of those if we have a future obligation for, to 25 to 35?
Yes, but one of the challenges we have for that very large number of affordable units is that we don't have crediting documentation. And so I'm not able to request credit for those units. So it means that I don't know if there's a deed restriction put in place. We would have to do a title search. The affordable units may not have had a compliant deed restriction, or they have simply, both of those things could be true, but they've also come and gone in the sense that the unit was created, the deed restriction was put in place, the deed restriction has lapsed, or would have lapsed, and so we really don't have the ability to go back and identify whether or not they were properly administered because of a loss of time and also change in ownership. And also many of those units, some of those units were created prior to 1980. Many of the housing authorities units were created prior to 1980. And no affordable housing unit created in 1980 or prior to 1980 is eligible for credit. Now, so if we had a project, let's say development created in 1975 with 50 affordable housing units, none of those units are eligible for credit against our obligation. And so that's an additional category of units in that 1,600.
Okay. And do you know how many units have been added since 2019? Well,
I don't have that figure on me.
I'm not asking for a firm number, but those units will be available for credit if needed?
Yeah, I would anticipate that any of those units, as well as perhaps some, if there are units prior to them that we might want to consider, we'll revisit that fact in 2025 to determine if it makes sense then to take credit for those units against our obligation.
Okay, and if we were not an urban aid municipality, would there be any obligation that the city has as of right now?
If we were not a qualified urban aid municipality and never had been, I would expect that we would have a prior round obligation as well as a third round obligation.
But because we were in that category, those obligations
Or zero.
are no longer, or there never was that obligation.
Right, never calculated. for
Okay.
us.
Are we still under the municipality moving forward, or?
Right now, you're a qualified urban aid municipality. I would need a change from state's designation in the fourth round or for that not to be applicable.
How long ago, was that because you were getting money? Or was it because you
No.
had, or because you were affordable? Is that-
Yeah, it had to do with the municipal characteristics of population, income. And so the state has a handful of municipalities that are qualified urban aid municipalities like Trenton, Perth Amboy, or a couple other examples.
Okay. And
You're done, I have some legal questions.
Can I just have one more question?
Okay.
So I'm a little worried, you said like, again, about crediting towards our future obligations, and, someone going like, somebody wasn't checking, if you did these things right. And then Jim asked a question about 2019. Like, how far back do we know, how far back can we credit affordable units? And I know, you don't know right now exactly, but like, and all the stuff we're doing now that we have approved, I mean, are they all gonna be properly administered, so we'll be able to get credit them?
I have no reason to believe they won't be properly administered, notwithstanding the history. This is a very different time, different folks involved. I would expect that any unit that the planning board has approved in the recent past will be properly administered.
I have a question that's a direct legal on that issue. That goes a little further. All right, we know what's happened. We can't unring the bell, we can't change what's happened, we're stuck with this situation. And this is what the city is requesting through council and everyone else. This is what it takes to settle the lawsuit and avoid the city of Asbury Park having some much more serious problems, correct?
Correct.
Now, going forward, we approve projects that have affordable housing portions. It's in there, it's in the resolution, it's in the report that a certain percentage has to be. Who is minding the store? Who takes that and looks at those documents, the deeds for those units and the like, to ensure that the proper provisions are in those deeds so that when they're recorded, anybody that does a search will be on notice that there's restrictions on those units. I don't do that. We've never been asked to do that as a planning board. So we've already been making, it comes on our desk, we push it down the road to the next part of the agencies. Who is going to be in a position that's going to ensure that all of those documents that require that will have the proper provisions?
So the city's planning office with Michelle Alonso coordinates with me, as well as the city's Affordable Housing Council, Mike Edwards at Sarnia Associates. And so as projects are approved, I've had developers agreements shared with me, and I would expect that she's going to continue to do.
That has to be looked at by a lawyer.
Yeah,
With all
and
due respect to planners. Those provisions are legal provisions that really need a lawyer's look. If it's special housing council, or it's the gentleman, Mike, that you just mentioned, whoever it is, somebody's got to look at this stuff as an attorney who will be responsible if it's not there. You're guilty of malpractice. Okay? It says this is what the city required in the approvals, the documents, and this is what's in there, so that so this can't happen again. Because anybody that does a title search with any of these documents, they're going to see on notice thousands of real estate closings. I see a title report, I see a restrictive covenant in there, I'm going to go, okay, it's going to be a problem. I'm not going to close title. Okay. So we just need to make sure that somebody, it's not just going to be, well, you think this, or you think that. You got to know. You got to know that you're going to fix it.
I totally agree, and right now that coordination is happening outside the planning board between your city departments and the consultants.
Okay, all right.
Well, even beyond that, like affordable housing, like, the Zell and or any of them, they could build. Someone in power has to check, right? This unit is leased to this person for this rent, and they qualify for this income. And then it's got to be checked for, a lease expiration, that it's still the same. That's all someone is going to do. Is this not your bailiwick?
No, these are fair questions for me, that's fine. If we take the Asbury Avenue project, for example, that's going to be owned and operated by an affordable housing developer, L&M Development, so they do this work. And so this is a good example. They're going to be conducting administration of their units on the project. It will be coordinated through CGPNH, who is the city's affordable housing administrator. They will provide assistance with marketing of the units. They will provide oversight of income qualifications, and they will also provide oversight of, they will help prepare the monitoring, as I had referenced. So in that example, in many of your developers where you have just Joe Schmo developer who happens to be doing affordable housing, that developer will be obligated to work with CGPNH in order to income qualify, advertise the units, et cetera. And so they will see all of those details. For other projects where we have a qualified affordable housing developer like L&M, CGP&H will be in an oversight role of that developer. And so it's sort of a tiered structure, if you will, with the developer, the affordable housing administrator, who may or may not have significant involvement depending on the qualifications of the developer, and then city staff and consultants, myself, Mike Edwards, your city department manager for affordable housing, are all confirming the information, and then it's going to court for review and confirmation and approval.
That's like for the whole sewer stuff, right? No?
The court is monitoring everything now.
Everything.
Yeah, so before you would submit these detailed information, what is the rent, what is the income level, et cetera, of each unit, and that would go to the state agency. That would go to COA. They had a whole monitoring database that municipalities were working with state agency staff with. Now, because the agency is essentially shut down, we're taking that same type of information, different forms, and instead submitting it to court, to Fair Share Housing Center, and they are essentially doing the job of the state agency to oversee and confirm compliance of individual developers as well as the municipality's total housing plan.
So CBH, they'll be handling all affordable housing.
Yes, in coordination
And
with
also-
other city professionals, yes,
And all that stuff will be certified, with you.
yes.
Okay, can I get back? For the rehab units that we're talking about, altogether, we have like 450, basically. And that number is for a 10-year period,
For the 243, yes.
243 plus 206.
Well, the 206 are our RCA units. Those units, instead of, as I said, instead of handling it on a one-for-one unit replacement, we're essentially handling it on a one-for-one affordability control year basis. So instead of doing 206, we're doing 1/3 for 30 years.
So the 206 are on the affordable year.
Yeah, the 206 is the home blade site for 30 years.
Okay.
Just to boil that down very quickly.
Okay, and that number is good for 10 years.
The 206 or which?
Well, both of them.
243, our rehab obligation, that's a 10-year. Each of those have to have 10 years of affordability
Yes, okay.
controls.
Now you're changing the 206 to a 30-year.
The 206, we're doing 69 units for 30 years
Yeah.
instead of 206 for 10 years.
Okay. Okay. At the end of those periods, what's going to happen with those units?
Okay, so if you're, it really depends. But let's choose a common example. It's a rental unit, the 30 years has, well, these are gonna be housing authority units, so they're gonna be in a different category. And the housing authority, their sole mission is to provide affordable housing. I would anticipate that those units are gonna continue beyond 30 years. A more typical question along those lines is what happens at the end of a conventional type of affordable housing unit? Say it's an inclusionary development owned by a market rate developer that happens to have some affordable units. So 30 years later, at the end of the deed restriction, you have a household that was qualified as a low-income household. At the end of 30 years, they're still low income. The developer is not allowed to simply jack up the rent to market rate prices and evict the resident. Instead, they are obligated for as long as that person remains income qualified to continue to offer the reduced rents at the low income price point.
That person or that person's family, but if at the end of 32 years.
And if once that household leaves, that income qualified household leaves, the developer is then able to rent the unit at market rate prices.
Okay. At the end of 32 years, grandpa dies and grandson decides time to leave. That becomes a market rate if the grandson decides to stay.
He was on the, in your scenario, was he one of the income qualified residents?
Yeah.
Yeah, he can stay.
Okay.
And there's requirements for succession rights.
Yeah, absolutely.
But in theory, if we are also attacking the affordable housing problem with new units at all times from 0 to 30 years. There should be a bank of affordable housing. The window is moving.
Correct.
And so it's not abnormal that affordable units become market rate units over time, but we should be creating affordable units that have a 30-year deed restriction. So
Well,
it's kind of like we hope one in and one out, or really we hope 10,000 in and one out, but.
along those lines, I would think that what we would be doing is we would be looking at the projection for our area as to what the increase was going to be, and we would be banking affordable units, at least in the escalation of the population, so that at all times from here on in, we would have affordable units or more affordable units than are actually required. And that would be certainly as we increase in population, we would have an increase in affordable units.
Remember those words when we're looking at the zoning resolution again, because that's where we do it.
Well,
What?
but this.
We incentivize affordable housing through the zoning resolution.
Yeah, but this report, Eric, this report sets the tone for this.
Yes,
And it sets in the master plan. And, okay. In this report, the only area that I could take issue with would be the issue concerning the Washington Avenue area development. You're recommending making some units 3 stories. And that would, in my opinion, destroy the character of the Washington Avenue neighborhood. I think you should be more looking at the infill area of single and duplex on those vacant lots to keep the character of that neighborhood as it presently is and as it was presently or formerly envisioned.
I appreciate that, but the one thing I have to remind folks is this language for Washington, this area for Washington, as well as all of the other inclusionary zoning, is language that was contained in your 2019 housing plan, unchanged. So while it is a new housing plan, I just want to remind folks it is not a new policy, and it's honestly not one that we're able to change, given the negotiations with Fair Share Housing Center.
Yeah.
Okay. Just let me finish my notes here if I can. One other comment that I would like to make is that if we include in the next round, even whether we have an obligation in round 4 or not, if we include the units that we have recently approved, it would, in my opinion, it would negate some of the requirements. We've given the developers in certain areas a bonus floor on their buildings. And in doing that, we've changed the character, or we are changing the character of several neighborhoods. But if we had an obligation and we could use those prior approvals to fulfill that obligation, then we would no longer have a need to give a developer a bonus by adding another floor. And I think in the overall scheme of things, from a planning point of view, the city would be much better off. And maybe after we find out what that requirement is going to be, what the obligation will be, maybe we ought to go back and start looking at what we have done recently and maybe undo that get rid of that bonus, because it's a means to an end, but it's not a good planning tool, I don't think.
I think that when the city decides in 2025 if it wants to proceed and do a new fourth round plan, presumably you will, if opinions remain roughly the same. I think at that point, it's an opportunity for us to revisit our inclusionary housing, our policies, and to figure out exactly how we want to move forward with housing in the city. So we have a great opportunity to reevaluate these policies in about 2 years from now.
I haven't looked at the appendix to this, but I think this is a pretty good start, and I think you've done a good job on it.
Any other questions from our planning board members?
Now, can I make a comment?
Of course you may.
Thank you. I know Beth has been working on this for a couple of years. This has been an ongoing project with a lot of moving parts and negotiations with a number, and not nice negotiations, with a number of our partners in this agreement. What she has accomplished is amazing. And personally, I want to say thank you, Beth, because I know what's been going on in the background. And this has not been an easy project. And the fact that we're finally reaching an agreement is amazing. So thank you.
Anybody else? Yep, I'd like to open up for public comment, or anyone? Okay. I guess
Being none,
there'll be none, we won't go there.
it's now time to.
Yeah, we have to,
deliberate, yeah.
yes, I'd like to propose that we adopt the Asbury Park housing element and fair share plan as it stands. I'd like to make that motion.
I'll second.
James Bonanno,
Yes.
Councilwoman Clayton,
Yes.
Eric Gallipo,
Yes.
Jim Henry,
Yes,
Daniel Shinameo,
Yes.
Jennifer Souter,
Yes.
Michael Goonan,
Yes.
and Chairwoman Kurzak.
Yes. Thank you for all your hard work.
My
We
pleasure.
Much appreciated.
My pleasure.
You worked hard on that one.
Does everybody need a minute or, yes, all right, 5 minutes,
5 minutes?
and everybody come back.
Uh,
Motion to take a 5-minute break.
Motion, second?
I'll second.
Second, all in favor?
All in favor? Yes.
Okay. And James Bonanno, Councilwoman Clayton,
Here.
Eric Gallipo,
Here.
Jim Henry,
here,
Mayor Moore is absent, Daniel Shinameo, Jen Souter,
Here.
Michael Goonan, and
Here.
here, Chairwoman Kurzak.
Yes, here. All right, tonight we have our last piece of business is to vote on a vice chair, since this position has been vacant for a bit. This position is for the rest of 2023, so it's a few months, and obviously one of the responsibilities is to run any of the meetings that I am not available to run, amongst many other things that will be required of the vice chair once 2024 starts hitting, and when we start getting closer to master plan time and being on a lot of the boards and meetings that are going to have to be held. And there's a lot of work involved, let me just say that. But I'd just like to, the way that we're looking to do this is that I'd like to get some nominations of who we would like to nominate for a vice chair. Once we get those nominations, everyone is available to vote. The only people that we cannot nominate are James, Yvonne, and John. They cannot be nominated, as well as myself, but we cannot be nominated. So everybody else is available to be nominated, so if anybody would like to nominate a person, once they're nominated, and if there is more than one person, we will vote in a ballot that is a written ballot, so then Marie and John Jack will,
John's correct.
John, sorry.
My mother was still alive, she's still.
You say John? Okay, there you go. Marie and Jack will take a look at what those votes are, determine if there's a tie or if there is a clear winner, and we will congratulate them and move on.
Yes.
Okay, so I'm looking for any nominees for vice chair. Please don't everyone just jump at once.
I nominate Michael Goonan.
All right, we have Michael in the running. Anyone else?
I nominate Eric.
Eric? All right, Eric, Michael, anyone else? Okay, Eric and Michael. So Marie, can you give us our voting ballots? And I just ask that you put whosever name you'd like on the ballot, and
Does
they will tally.
A writing utensil.
I got, yeah.
I do need it.
I need to write something to write on. Oh, you're gonna give us is this our ballot?
This is your ballot.
Our secret.
You're so fancy, aren't you?
Thank you. And ballot.
And the ballot.
Thank you.
I would like a ballot, please. Thank you.
Secret ballot.
Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, the nominees can vote. Yeah,
Yes.
we need 5 out of 8 position. All right, Marie, collect.
Collect them up.
Wow.
List of promises.
I brought cookies.
I'm bringing cookies.
Send her the vice president for the rest of the time.
No more special meetings.
Yay! No more special meetings, I like that.
When's the next meeting?
2nd of October.
1 for Michael.
All right.
2 for Michael. 3 for Michael. 4 for Michael. 5 for Michael.
Oh, there's no reason.
6 for Michael. 1 for Eric. 2 for Eric. There are 6 votes in favor of Michael and 2 votes in favor of Eric.
Well, congratulations.
Congratulations, Michael.
Do we need the council to do anything about that, or is that like we just did it?
No.
Okay,
no.
they don't need to,
I'll do the updates.
yeah, you do the updates.
You may want to tell Lisa in the clerk's office.
Yeah, I actually, yeah. Send her emails. All right.
Okay,
Okay, congratulations and condolences.
yes, at the same
I don't know
time.
if you know what you just got yourself into.
Move to adjourn.
Yes, yes,
You're gonna get it. It's really
I'll
not
second.
working.
Second.
All in
Jim
favor?
and Eric.
All in favor on adjournment?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, none, ayes have it.
Ayes have it. Thank you, everyone.
Okay.